When my parents got divorced, I never thought anything could radically change my life. I was the older daughter, accustomed to a certain rhythm, one that didn't need any changes. But then my father, Robert, met Karen. At first, I saw her just as another woman who would be around him, but everything changed the moment we moved into her house. I couldn't say what was wrong. Everything looked like something out of a fairy tale. A new house with spacious rooms, a cozy garden, and a view of the lake where we could walk and enjoy life. But when my mother and I carried the boxes and stepped over the threshold of the house, something in the air shifted. This was Karen's house. I still couldn't understand why I didn't like being there. It was as if everything around was too new to feel like home, too foreign to feel at ease. Karen was a wonderful hostess. She always cooked something delicious, tried to be visible, and pleased everyone. I didn't even notice how she filled every corner of our new home with her presence. She was always there, in the kitchen, the bathroom, the hallway. Karen was everywhere. And although she tried to get closer to me, her excessive friendliness unbearably pushed me away. She had that bright yet sticky gaze that wouldn't let go. She would say, "I understand you," but something in her voice made me feel like she wasn't asking, but commanding. I tried to get used to her way of communicating, but I couldn't. It felt awkward, as if someone was persistently pestering you with requests, not to help, but to control. I saw how she watched my reactions closely, as if trying to understand what I was feeling, rather than just offering support. Sometimes I felt like she was trying so hard to be the perfect stepmother that she forgot I didn't need her constant attention. At first, I tried not to show my dissatisfaction, but it kept building up inside. On the outside, I was calm, but inside, something stirred restlessly, like an invisible hand trying to lift a stone that had been lying at the bottom of a river for so long that I could no longer remember if it had always been there. One night, I woke up to strange sounds. At first, I thought it was just a dream, that I shouldn't pay any attention to it, but when they repeated, I couldn't ignore them any longer. These were not the usual sounds of the house, not the creaking floorboards, nor the rain tapping against the window. They were coming from Karen's room. Quiet but persistent rustling noises, as if someone was whispering. I froze in my bed, staring into the darkness, trying to make sense of what was happening. I even pressed my ear to the pillow to not miss a single sound. But it continued, as though something or someone was moving invisibly within Karen's room. I could have told myself it was just a branch tapping against the window or the creak of old furniture, but my thoughts quickly shifted in another direction. There was no wind, and Karen herself didn't like leaving the windows open. Besides, the sound was too strange. I got out of bed and listened. The room was silent, but as soon as I closed my eyes again, the sounds returned. The quiet whispers that didn't resemble any ordinary nighttime noise. She wasn't the type to whisper at all. I didn't dare check what was happening, even though the urge to do so grew stronger with each passing moment. One thought kept spinning in my mind. What is she doing? I lay there pretending to sleep, but every time the sounds began again, I felt my body tense. I couldn't breathe properly. I tried to guess where the whispers were coming from, what they meant, but there was no answer. The next day, of course, I didn't say anything. Why would I? It could have been just my imagination, a fantasy born from fear or dissatisfaction. But with each passing day, I felt more and more that there was something in this house that wouldn't let me rest. Something hidden, something elusive, and perhaps these strange sounds were a part of that mystery. The morning after that night, when the sounds had kept me awake, Karen approached me with a proposition. We were sitting at the kitchen table, and she, with a cup of coffee in her hand, smiled at me as she always did, but today something in her smile seemed a bit intrusive. She started the conversation as if nothing had happened, as if there wasn't a shadow of tension between us that had hung in the air ever since I started noticing the oddities in her behavior. "Have you thought about what furniture we could put in the living room?" she asked, leaning forward. Her voice was light, but there was something in it that immediately made me uneasy. This wasn't just a casual suggestion, it was a step toward becoming more a part of my life, even if it was through something as trivial as choosing furniture. I didn't know what to say. Why was she offering this to me? Why now? And why so insistently? We weren't close, we'd barely exchanged greetings, and suddenly she was suggesting something that felt unnecessary, unnatural. I don't know. I haven't thought about it yet, I replied, but I felt that my words came out restrained, even cold. Karen, undeterred, continued, but now her tone had softened, almost cozy, as if she weren't just offering help, but insisting that there should be something more between us. I didn't like it. There was more in her words than just friendly concern. She wasn't asking, she was stating, as if she knew she should be there, that I needed her presence. I felt her trying to take up space in my life, crossing boundaries I was used to. I know you're worried about all of this, she said suddenly, leaning toward me again, but you don't have to be afraid. I'm here for you. Everything will be fine. Her words were soft, but there was something in them that made my heart tighten. It wasn't reassurance, it was an attempt to make me feel indebted to her, as though she already knew I couldn't cope without her help, that my life wouldn't be complete unless she intervened. My doubts grew even stronger. Thanks, Karen, I managed to say, trying to hide my discomfort. But her gaze was insistent, and I found it hard to look away. Karen was watching me, not just waiting for an answer, but studying every word, every movement, as if she were trying to understand exactly how I was reacting to her. It became unbearably hard to breathe. The sense of wariness I had felt now became almost physical pain. Why was she so eager to be around? Why had her attention become so intrusive? I wanted to get up from the table, stand up, leave, but I stayed seated, trapped. Karen continued speaking, her voice growing softer, and her presence growing more suffocating. And all the while I felt something inside me protesting against this closeness, which felt unnatural and foreign. With each passing day, I felt more and more that something was wrong. It was something elusive, yet persistent. Karen didn't back off. She found more and more reasons to be around. At first it was small, seemingly harmless suggestions. Helping with the cleaning, offering tea, asking how my day had gone. I still tried to respond politely, ignoring the fact that something about it made me uneasy. But then it became part of my day, something I could no longer ignore. Every time I tried to be alone, she found a way to be near. In the evenings, when I sat in a chair with a book, she would come up and start a conversation about something neutral. Most of the time the talks were meaningless, but I couldn't help but notice that there was something more in her words than simple communication. One day, when I returned home after a walk with friends, I found her standing in the hallway, as if she had been waiting for me. She hardly moved, and her gaze was tense, as if she was checking when I would return, as if I was meant to be in her line of sight. It wasn't normal. And I couldn't shake the feeling that she was watching every step I took. I tried to ignore my feelings, convincing myself that she was just caring for us, that her behavior was an attempt to create a cozy and warm atmosphere in our new home. But with every step she took near mine, with every offer to help, I felt more and more that she was invading my space, my personal space, which I valued so much. She even came into my office when I tried to focus on my homework, sitting beside me and starting to ask questions I didn't want to answer. She would ask how I was feeling, what I thought of Robert, of our new life. I would answer briefly, but each time I felt her eyes never leaving me, her words turning from simple questions to requests for me to open up to her. It was as if she was pulling information from me, as if she expected me to tell her everything that was going on in my head. But I couldn't. I couldn't bring myself to trust her. No matter how hard I tried to distract myself from these thoughts, they wouldn't go away. It seemed more and more that Karen was watching every move I made, trying to figure something out, trying to calculate something. And with each day, it became harder to shake the feeling that I was being observed. One day, I was standing by the window, looking outside, when I suddenly felt that someone was watching me. I turned around. Karen was standing in the doorway, her eyes fixed directly on me. She didn't say a word. just watched. Her gaze was empty, but in it I sensed something that made me feel cold. It was as if she already knew everything that was going on in my head, as if she could see what I didn't want to see myself. It became unbearably heavy. I started to suspect that all of this wasn't just a desire to be around. There was something more to it, something dark, hidden, that she wasn't showing me but was inevitably affecting my feelings. I could no longer simply ignore these strange behaviors. Something was unsettling me, and I knew I needed to understand what lay behind Karen's actions. One evening, Karen invited me to talk about family. It was an ordinary day, and I was starting to get used to her persistent attempts to bond with us. But her invitation to discuss something deep and personal, as if she had purposely chosen the moment when I was alone, made me uneasy. It was unexpected, and it didn't feel like the usual conversations about furniture or small things. We sat on the couch in the living room, and Karen began the conversation by saying she wanted to clear up a few things. Her manner was gentle, but there was an invisible force in her words. It was as if she were trying to draw a line between us, to define her place in this new family. "I understand that you're probably struggling with the changes," she said, her voice full of sympathy. "It's hard to adjust to us, but I want you to know I'm not here to replace your mother, but to be a part of your life. You don't want there to be this wall between us, do you?" I was on edge. Something in her tone made me feel like her words were more than just a conversation. She spoke as if I needed to confirm something, to admit something, and I couldn't understand why that mattered to her. It made me uncomfortable. "I don't think I'm building walls," I replied, not knowing what else to say. "I'm just getting used to it. It's a new house, new people. Everything is changing and I don't always know how to feel about it." Karen watched me closely, her gaze almost hypnotic, as though she were reading my thoughts. She leaned in a little closer, and I felt that in that moment, she wasn't just seeking answers, she was seeking acknowledgement. Her question wasn't just a question, it was a test. "You don't have to be afraid," she said with a smile, but there was a shadow of something else in her eyes. "We're a family now. You can trust me. Don't be shy, tell me what you think of Robert and all of this. I know it's not easy for you, but if you open up, it'll be easier for us to be together." I felt something tighten inside me. I didn't want to open up to Karen. I couldn't allow myself to be that vulnerable in front of her, in front of a woman who, in such a short time, had so carefully invaded my space, my personal life. I was scared that she somehow knew what I needed, what I wanted from her, what I should do to be accepted. Her words felt too slick to be honest. She was trying to worm her way into my mind, to recognize my state and emotions, to control my perception of the situation. I realized she wasn't just interested in my feelings, but was trying to manipulate my thoughts, to fit herself into my inner space, to make me feel like I couldn't do without her. "I don't know," I forced out, although deep down I already had a feeling that something wasn't right. "I can't talk about this right now." She didn't press further, but her gaze remained on me, as if trying to understand what I was hiding. Her presence was unbearably heavy. I felt a growing sense of anxiety inside me. This conversation wasn't just sincere interest, it was a test. And I felt that now, I had to be careful. Several days had passed since that conversation with Karen, and although I tried to forget the tense atmosphere that had developed between us, something kept unsettling me. With every step she took, it became harder to avoid her attention, but I decided that I would keep my distance no matter how hard she tried to be near. But one day, everything changed. It happened when I was sitting in the living room, exhausted after a long day. Once again, I tried to focus on my book, but my thoughts were restless. Then, unexpectedly, Karen entered the room. She didn't say a word, just came over and sat down next to me on the couch. Everything happened so quickly that I didn't even have time to understand what she was planning to do. I felt her presence, her warmth, before I could even realize what was happening. Her body was right next to mine, too close, and her gaze, It was something indescribable that made my skin tense up. Her presence was on the verge of invasion, but she didn't say anything. She just sat there, her breathing soft and steady. And then, she kissed me. It was a light, almost imperceptible kiss on my cheek, but it left a mark on my soul, like a heavy stone sinking into water. Her lips, though soft, left an imprint of something too personal, too intimate. I froze, and her warm, caring gaze never left me. It was as if she was trying to get into my thoughts, into my inner world, and she had succeeded. I couldn't push her away, nor could I say anything in response. When she stood up and left, I remained seated in the same spot, unable to move. My mind was noisy, as if there were sounds echoing in it that I couldn't quiet. I couldn't understand what this meant. Why had she done that? What was I to her? Why had she acted this way? When her footsteps faded and the house once again fell into silence, I felt fear seep into me, like something dark and heavy, something that wouldn't let me be at ease. I couldn't understand what she wanted, but one thing I knew for sure: everything had changed. I couldn't remain indifferent. Something inside me had shifted, something I couldn't explain, but something that had already become an inseparable part of me. I had to figure out what was going on, and why this was happening to me. I couldn't stay silent any longer. Everything that was happening was pulling me deeper into this strange and tense world where I no longer felt safe. Every word she spoke, every look, every action, it was all becoming more tangled and threatening. I had to tell someone to understand what was going on, and I decided to talk to my father. When Robert came home from work, I could already feel how difficult it would be to get my thoughts out. There was nothing in his eyes that suggested a problem. He was tired but smiling, and I knew he was genuinely happy to be home, in this house that seemed so new and full of hope for all of us. But it was precisely at that moment, when we were sitting at dinner, that I felt if I didn't say it now, I would never have the courage to speak up. "Dad," I began, feeling the words struggle to escape my throat, "I need to talk to you. It's about Karen." Robert looked at me, a little cautiously but calmly. As always, he was ready for a conversation, as though nothing unusual was happening. "Did something happen?" he asked, not looking up from his plate. "It's not just—" I started, but my voice caught in my throat, as if the words were stuck halfway. "I feel like Karen is acting strangely. She's constantly watching me, pushing her help and attention on me. It's too much." "You still can't get used to her," he said, with a touch of weariness in his voice. "That's normal. She's trying to make you feel comfortable. I know the changes are hard for you, but you need to understand, she just wants to help." "But you don't understand," I said, no longer hiding the pain in my voice. "She's not just helping. She's obsessively watching me, every step I take, and I don't know what to expect from her. This isn't normal." "You just can't adjust to the new situation. It's natural. I was your age once, and it was hard for me too. You'll get through this and you'll see that she's not a bad person." I stood up, unable to stay in that room any longer. I realized he wasn't going to listen to me. I was alone, and in this house full of expectations and shadows, I couldn't find any support. None. "You don't understand," I whispered, standing by the door. Robert turned to look at me, but I couldn't continue. I left the room and went to my own. Inside, everything was burning. I was lost. I had no certainty, no hope that anyone would understand me. All I had left was to accept that I was alone now, in a house where each day was becoming more foreign and frightening. When Robert found out what had happened, I saw my world crumble around me. The day I decided to tell him, my words had no impact. But everything changed when he learned the truth for himself. At some point, for reasons I didn't know, he came face to face with Karen, and she didn't hide from him what had transpired between us. My suspicions, my fears, all of it became undeniable. I could no longer hide the fact that Karen had crossed my boundaries, and now my father knew. When he came to my room, his face was completely expressionless. It wasn't just disappointment. It wasn't just anger. It was complete shock, as though he had suddenly realized he didn't know me, didn't understand what was happening in his own life. It was almost like a betrayal, one I couldn't forgive myself for. "You should have told me sooner," he said, his voice cold. "I wouldn't have understood if you had just said it. Why didn't you speak?" I tried to justify myself, to say that I couldn't trust him, that I couldn't trust Karen. I tried to explain how she had invaded my space, how her behavior felt unnatural, how I felt her desire to control me. But all I got in return was silence. Robert didn't want to listen. He was too disappointed that I couldn't handle it, that in his view I had ruined the relationship. "I didn't expect this from you," he said, his voice trembling with hurt. "You can't even understand how hard this is for me. I was sure you would accept her, that we would be a family. But you,